Book 6. 1. The war which the Sidonians waged with the Artesians and the Tyrians, by what means they first attained great power, but were afterwards reduced to want, and how the kings resisted hereby. And how the Tyrians, having slain Agathon the Sidonian, took possession of the citadel of the Ascalonians, is related in the 5th book. However, how the Byblians drove the kings out of the city and conquered Gomade, and the deeds of the Sidonians, as also the wars of the Jews and the Sumerians, will be related in this book. Now, he says, the citizens had assembled in the royal citadel, and had urged the king to punish the companions who had offended the Byblians. But Basanus, in order to repel the citizens, sent out his spearmen, who, in an orderly array, made an attack upon the people, but the Byblians resisted with a great shout, and fled, impaling each other with spears. In this way, when the Bybli had defeated the states, they broke into the royal citadel by force, and whomever they found in the king's retinue they massacred. Basanus himself fled wounded and died the next day. After this, the Bybli entrusted the government of the city to the Senate alone, because of the king's insolence and injustice. But the sons of Basanus, in order to recover the kingdom, set out with an army against the city, and arrived at night, in order to seize the gates unexpectedly. When they were informed of this, the townspeople fled as they approached. They then besieged the city, intending to capture it by starvation, and, while the Bybli were bringing provisions into the city by fleet, they blocked the harbor with iron chains. Since the city was being pressed by starvation, they hoped that the besiegers would soon be able to capture it. But this hope was unsuccessful. For the Bybli, having decorated their ships, were carried on long chains, and all stood on the other side of the ship, in order to divert it to that side where the chains were, and the more easily to surround the stakes with ropes. Then, with the same force, they rushed to the other shore, where the ship was suddenly lifted. And in this way they pulled out the chains and stakes with a loud cry and carried them into the city. 2. When they learned these things, the enemy began to despair of taking the city, and sent an ambassador to Bybli, a nobleman from the mountainous region, to make peace. Since he had just arrived in the camp with auxiliary forces and had never seen the ship, he wished to inspect it more closely. So, having been sent to the ship by Bybli, he admired its length, its size and strength, but especially its speed. But having examined everything, he returned to the camp and soon made peace. From this time on, Bybli was in an interregnum of 2100 years, and everyone acted according to his own will. As a result, many wars broke out, and the whole region was depopulated. But the number of wild beasts, lions, panthers and wolves increased in a strange way, so that they devoured even the people in the middle of the city. 3. At the same time the Bybli sent ships against Gomades, who was a sea robber who had done him great harm, especially the Cham, whose name was a cow. But when Gomades was anchoring his ships off the Cytinian mountains, Lytras arrived with his fleet and attacked him with 200 Bybli and 100 mercenaries, and rebuked many of them. But some of Gomades' companions fled from the ships to the mountains, but when the Cytinians came to his aid, Gomades himself, like those who had followed him, were captured and the next day beheaded. Which war arose in this way. Gomades, a very wealthy man, had presented himself to the king of the Tengai, who bestowed upon him the highest honors. But when he despised the Aradians and the Bybli, a certain merchant from Bybli, pushing the one standing nearby and pointing his finger at Gomades as he passed by, said, "Now indeed. This man is proud and despises everyone. Once upon a time, a slave in our city, although he had been beaten many times, did not even utter a word." Misinterpreting these words, Gomades laid an ambush for Byblius, and when he had escaped, he armed a fleet, and slaughtered all the Byblius whom he found, and seized their ships. At Citium he was defeated by the Byblius. 4. But those who at that time held the power of the Sidonians had little power. Asmoneus had reigned 8 years when Basanus died. After the death of Basanus, Asmoneus reigned 39 more years, so that in all he was king for 47 years. When he died, Cyborzus, the son of Asmoneus, assumed the power of the Sidonians. He was killed in a battle against the Tyrians, after he had reigned 31 years. But Nasuchus, the son of Asmoneus, was first thrown out of the city, and he fled to the mountains, and was hunted by lions, of which there were a multitude there. But when the time had passed, the Sidonians, driven out by the Tyrians and driven into difficulties, created Nasuchus as their emperor, under whose leadership they conquered the enemy by land and sea, and made the Tyrians and Beretians tribute to themselves. But when Ascalon was besieged, he was wounded by a stone in the gate and died after a reign of 8 years. But the Sidonians, having killed him, took him by ship to their own port, and there, dressed in royal clothing and placed him in a chariot, they carried him to the tombs of the kings. With virgins preceding him and singing an elegy, "Lament, O men of Sidon, for he is the most beautiful of all, and mourn, O virgins. For Nasuchus is dead, the most flourishing king, the conqueror of the Tyrians. He was not effeminate, like the sons of kings, nor did he make great songs, which are wont to be sung in the castles of kings. But he rejoiced in the shout of soldiers, and a lion rejoiced in the roaring. Who among you can endure the yellow eyes of a dead lioness? But who dares to approach a place thick with trees, where there are wild beasts?" But the brave man fled from the panthers, and Nasuchus slept in the dens of lions. But now the victor of wars was killed by a blow of a stone from the wall, and a boy killed the lion tamer. 5. After this the Sidonians made Sislon king, the son of Nasusius, who reigned 49 years, and sent a large fleet to found a colony in the vicinity of Tartessian, from where they could trade with the inhabitants of that region, for which reason the Sidonians were forbidden to enter the town of Tartessian. But the king of Tartessian conquered the colony and sold the Sidonians, whom he had taken captive into the countries of the barbarians as slaves. He also sent a fleet to the islands, devastated the Sidonian colonies in Tenga and Ursiphonia, and returned to Tartessian with a great booty. From that time on the Sidonians did not dare to sail to Tenga and Ursiphonia, since there was danger from the robbers who existed in that region, and from the fleet of Artesians which roamed in those parts of the sea. 6. At this time Dothrepes expelled Calliope, king of the Onisans, from the city, and obtained the kingdom. Calliope fled to the Jews in Idumea, and remained there for a long time. For this reason a discord arose between the Onisans and the Jews. A little later, therefore, when the Jews were grazing their flocks in the pastures of the salt marshes, the Onisans and the Omlisans attacked them at night, killed the shepherds, and drove the flocks into the town. When this effort was successful, Dothrepes sought to subdue all of Idumea and sent out Ismilum with an army, who, with the help of the Omlisans, defeated the Jews. The Omlisans, after the battle had been fought, returned to their own territory with great booty, while the Onisans pursued the Jews. The next day, renewing the battle, the Jews slaughtered many of their enemies, but captured Ismilum himself alive. The Jewish leaders ordered him to be brought and gave him fresh cheese and bran bread, and naked clothing. He, however, said that he was not accustomed to such food or clothing, for he had been accustomed to purple garments. Then, being born among the leaders, he said, "You said that our bread was tasteless, and our clothes were untidy. What then did you come to us to take?" When he had spoken this, he put Ismilima to death. After this, the Jews and the Somarians waged war for a long time with the Onachini and the Omlachini and the Sarati, but they could not take the fortresses of the Sarati. The Somarians went down to Batanea, which region also produces balsam, but which is more valuable, because it produces nebite, which Sidmon, returning to Tyre, received as a gift from the Bybli. For the mountains of the Nebites produce an abundance of balsam, and wheat grows abundantly in the villages. But after the death of Sidmon, Nebite and the villages came under the rule of Agmon, the eldest son of Cusabi. 7. Now the Jews had taken possession of the country of the Anachenes, but the land of the Moabites, Omlacenes, and Betanes was in the possession of the Somarians, who had many herds. When the Betanians desired these, they sent ambassadors to the Moabites to expel and plunder the Somarians, promising that if those who lived in Betania left for war, they would throw wooden chips into the Jordan River, which would signify that the Somarians had left and would call upon the Moabites to join forces and more easily defeat those who remained at home. Therefore, when the Somarians sometimes broke into another country, and the Moabites noticed the chips floating in the river, they very quickly set out with their army for Betania, and after killing them, they made a great spoil, and drove away the oxen, the sheep, and the flocks of goats. But the Somarians who were in Moab, when they heard what had happened to their brothers, at first fled in disarray, but a little later they returned and defeated the Moabites and killed them all. But they could not bring the mountains of the Betanes under their control. The Somarians therefore lived around the Asphalt Lake in that part which is towards the east, and the Jews towards the west. Afterwards they also defeated the rulers of the Carnians and the princes of the inland region, and made all this part their dominion. But they did not take possession of any of their cities which are situated by the sea. 8. Now when the city of the Carnians had been taken by the Somarians, and Atimus the king had been killed, the Sidonians made an alliance with the Tyrians and Biblians and Aradians and Beretians and the inhabitants of the mountains to repel the Somarians if they should attempt to make an incursion. And they appointed Saslon the Sidonian as their leader. Therefore, the Sidonians sent 5,000 soldiers, the Tyrians 2,000, the Biblians 1,200, the Aradians and Beretians 800,000, 10,000 in all, to march to the mountain and encamp in the village of Momagura. When the Somarians heard that there was only an army on the mountain, they refrained from raiding. 9. After the death of Saslon, Ratops of Saslon ruled the Sidonians for 62 years. But the interregnum, which had long existed among the Biblians, ended, and Oda sent him a king. For after the city of Bashan was expelled, the Biblians were without a king for 122 years, and with a benevolent spirit they received Oda, in whose hand the kingdom was for 40 years. Afterwards, Ptolemy, the son of Oda, was king for 42 years. In those times the kings of the cities kept peace among themselves for a long time. But after Ratops, Gisilbas, the son of Ratops, ruled the Sidonians for 48 years. When Ptolemy died, Orpheus reigned in the city of the Biblians for 26 years. He had a slave called Sibnas, for the Biblians call Sibnas a slave, whom Orpheus adopted, who was without children, and when Orpheus died, the Biblians made him king. He held the kingdom for 27 years. Gisilbas had 2 sons, Peters the elder and Barcas the younger, of whom Peters ruled the Sidonians for 39 years after the death of his father. Barcas first lived with his brother. When Sibnas died, Barcas sent Peters king to Bibli. Barcas reigned for 33 years. At this time the Amathians sent colonists into the plain facing east, whose leader was a man 8 cubits tall, who, advancing into the mountains of Armenia, brought the whole region under his control. The same mountains were inhabited by bards, both natives and colonists, who were educated. When Barcas heard that everything was open to them and that even the most hidden things could not be hidden from him, he ordered a scribe to go to those bards, to ask them what remedy he should use for this new and unheard of disease. They said that wine was a very healthy liquid for men and easy to prepare. But a man returning home and oppressing his wife, who was drunk, could easily bring her back to health by beating the woman with a stick. When the scribe reported this to the king, Nebrana had already died, having been drunk beyond measure. 10. After the death of Peter, the kingdom of the Sidonians was for 36 years in the hands of Obdesernus, the son of Peter, who, after the death of Barca, king of Bibli, sent his brother Potemachus, who reigned 50 years. But when Obdesernus was taken by surprise, he handed over the kingdom of the Sidonians to his son Mokba, who reigned 42 years. Afterwards Jonach held the kingdom for 18 years, and Potemachus, failing in strength and years, persuaded him to hand over the kingdom of the Bybli to the son of his brother Abuda. Abudas was king for 27 years. After the death of Jonach, Soromolkas, the son of Jonach, ruled the Sidonians for 32 years. After Abudas, his son Kolbas reigned for 11 years, whom they also call Macron Motasan, because he composed very sweet verses. After him the kingdom of the Biblians was under Gerson 6 years, under Misran 38, under Jaba 40, under Deton 41, under Balmaborotus 36, under Atlantes 26, under Zabdiba 41. Under Asd rule 5, under Cimarontus 19 years. After him the Biblians made Adonilibna king. However, after Soromolka Memram, Doborpus, Kada and Moliochus held the kingdom of the Sidonians for a total of 100 years. But Gadalcaris, the son of Meliochus, reigned 43 years. After his death, the supreme power of the Phoenicians was transferred to the Tyrians.